This is Leader Time by FedNet for February 25, 2025. Thank you for listening. Senate Majority Leader John Thune discussed the pending nomination of Jamieson Greer to be U.S. Trade Representative and Energy Policy. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, yesterday evening we invoked cloture on the nomination of Jamieson Greer to be U.S. Trade Representative. Mr. Greer is admirably qualified for this position. He spent most of his career specializing in trade law and has extensive international experience. He served as a missionary in Brussels, received a master's degree from 2 Paris institutions, served as a law clerk for the European Court of Justice, and was stationed in both Turkey and Iraq as a member of the Air Force. Most significantly of all, he spent 3 years of the previous Trump administration serving as Chief of Staff to then U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, who spoke highly of Mr. Greer's work. He is, in short, very well prepared for this role. Mr. President, one of my top priorities when it comes to trade is expanding opportunities for our nation's agricultural producers, like the many farmers and ranchers in my state of South Dakota. The Biden administration frequently seemed to have no interest in trade beyond negotiating on climate and labor issues. Witness the fact, Mr. President, that there was not a single FTA negotiated during the Biden administration. Not a single one. All the opportunities across the globe to enter into trade agreements to open up and provide access to America's farmers and ranchers and small business people. Well, that was a real disservice, Mr. President, to America's ag producers and to our small businesses. Trade is critical to the continued success of American agriculture. 20% of U.S. ag products are exported yearly, and exports provide substantial farm income. Soybeans and corn alone accounted for 22% of all U.S. exports by value in 2024. But thanks in part to the Biden administration's almost complete inaction on trade, the current agricultural trade deficit is at an all-time high. And Mr. President, that's an area of our economy where we've always run trade surpluses, historically. Consistently over time, decade after decade, we've always run trade surpluses in agriculture until the last few years under the Biden administration, where we started racking up not only deficits, but now record trade deficits. They're at an all-time high. And I have to say that's a real problem for ag producers, especially considering the other challenges they've been facing. And it's something that needs to be addressed. And I know that the Trump administration is committed to meeting the needs of farmers and ranchers, and I'm looking forward to working with Mr. Greer to expand opportunities for our agricultural producers. I'm very encouraged by the fact that Mr. Greer has expressed his commitment to working closely with the Senate Finance Committee, of which I am a member, and with Congress. President Biden's trade representative was completely uninterested in working with Congress, so it is very encouraging to hear Mr. Greer's commitment to communication and collaboration. And I look forward to a close partnership between the administration and Congress in the coming months and years as we work to expand opportunities for American producers. Mr. President, this afternoon we're going to vote on a resolution to end the energy emergency that President Trump declared upon taking office. Apparently, according to the resolution's authors, this energy emergency declaration isn't justified. And Mr. President, in response to that, I'd like to just read a headline from the Washington Post last March. And that headline is, and I quote, "Amid explosive demand, America is running out of power," end quote. Now let me just repeat that, Mr. President, for my Democrat colleagues. Amid explosive demand, America is running out of power. Running out of power. The article stated, and I quote again, "Vast swaths of the United States are at risk of running short of power as electricity-hungry data centers and clean technology factories proliferate around the country, leaving utilities and regulators grasping for credible plans to expand the nation's creaking power grid," end quote. And then, of course, there was this headline from another major news outlet in December, and I quote again, "More than half the U.S. faces blackout risks in next decade," the NERC finds, end quote. Again, More than half the U.S. faces blackout risks in next decade. Large swaths of the U.S., the article noted, could experience rolling blackouts due to capacity shortfalls during extreme weather events in the next decade, according to a grid reliability analysis released Tuesday. The Mid-Continent Independent System Operator faces the highest risk of energy shortfalls starting as soon as this summer, according to the report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which can force grid operators to trigger rolling outages to prevent wider system harm, end quote. Mr. President, these aren't niche publications. These are mainstream media outlets. Mainstream media outlets reporting on the fact that, and I quote again, America is running out of power. If my Democrat colleagues don't consider that an emergency, I just don't know what to say. Mr. President, as these articles and others make clear, the United States electric grid is extremely shaky, thanks in substantial part to a movement to shut down fossil fuel-fired power plants before reliable sources of clean energy are available to replace them. America is running out of power, even as we face huge new power demands. The boom in data center construction, in particular, to power the rise of artificial intelligence, is placing and will place vast new demands upon the grid. A recent CNBC headline noted, and again I quote, "Data centers powering artificial intelligence could use more electricity than entire cities," end quote. More electricity than entire cities. And Mr. President, if we continue on our current course, there is a very real risk that we're not going to be able to meet that demand, that we're going to end up with widespread brownouts and blackouts, or electricity rationing, or de facto rationing forced by sky-high energy bills. Now, Mr. President, I realize that this is an inconvenient truth to my Democrat colleagues. Why? Because it interferes with their plans to force the United States off conventional energy. If Democrats acknowledge that we are rapidly approaching an energy crisis, they might have to actually consider the consequences of their energy plans, to consider what might happen when you put immense new power demands on an already shaky grid by forcing Americans into electric vehicles, to consider what might happen if you drastically limit domestic oil and gas production, even as the nation continues to require a steady and affordable supply of conventional fuels. And so I do understand why Democrats would prefer not to acknowledge our national energy emergency. But acknowledge it or not, it's there. And if we don't take action, we're going to be facing some very serious problems in the very near future. So I'm grateful to have a president who recognizes and acknowledges the energy emergency facing our nation. And I look forward to working with him to unleash American energy production and achieve a secure, affordable, and reliable energy future for the American people.
Democratic leader Chuck Schumer took his leader time to criticize President Trump and Republican plans for tax cuts.
So, Mr. President, over the last month, it's become clear how Donald Trump and Republicans govern. Donald Trump and Republicans have focused on things most Americans don't care about or don't like, while refusing to focus on things Americans actually do care about. Donald Trump and Republicans have focused on things most Americans don't care about or don't even like, while refusing to focus on things Americans actually do care about. Exhibit A of these things that Americans don't like is what's happening today in the House of Representatives. As soon as today, House Republicans will advance a budget resolution clearing the way for perhaps the most draconian cuts to Medicaid in American history. Also, Republicans can cut taxes for their billionaires club and have the American people pick up the tab and pay the price. This is in the category of things Americans really don't like. There's only one proper way to describe the Republican plan that's moving through the House this week: radical. Radical. The Republican plan radically hurts American families while radically helping the billionaires club. Republicans are so eager to cut taxes for billionaires that they'd increase the deficit by $1 trillion or more to make room for their sweetheart deal tax cuts for billionaires like Elon Musk. Republicans are also pushing for trillion in cuts for working and middle-class Americans, endangering everything from Medicaid to nutrition programs to housing assistance and so much more. The Republican bill could cut as much as $880 billion from Medicaid alone. That means 80 million Americans, kids, veterans, people with disabilities, rural Americans, the elderly, are all at risk. And why? Why are Republicans putting these people at such risk and hurting things that benefit them, not waste, things that actually go to people and help them? They're doing it to make life easier for the billionaires club. They're doing it to cut taxes for the ultra-wealthy. Last week, here in the Senate, during Vote-A-Rama, I pushed an amendment that said we should have no tax breaks for billionaires. I pushed an amendment calling for no billionaire tax breaks if even $1 of Medicaid spending was cut. What's more important? Helping people get health care? Helping the elderly stay in nursing homes? Helping our veterans, especially those who may be out of work, from getting the health care they need? What's more important? That or a tax break for someone who's very wealthy already? Well, on both amendments, the one that said no tax breaks for billionaires and the one that said no tax breaks for billionaires even if $1 of Medicaid spending was cut, both times Republicans overwhelmingly said no. Let us hope, maybe a distant hope, but let us hope that House Republicans show more courage, more compassion, more common sense to reject these horrible, harmful, radical cuts. This is not what the American people signed up for in this election. Billionaire tax cuts is a clear example of things Americans don't like. Just look at all the backlash Republicans are seeing in their town halls. And Republicans know this. Republicans know that cutting taxes for wealthy billionaires is something most Americans don't like at all. They didn't campaign on it. Oh, no. I didn't hear any of our Republican colleagues who were running go home and say, I want to cut taxes for the billionaires, although that's the first thing they're doing when they get here. And yet Republicans seem to be full steam ahead all the same. This, of course, is part of the pattern I'm talking about. Over the last month, Donald Trump and Republicans have spent their energy focused on things Americans don't like, while refusing to focus on things Americans actually do care about, like inflation, rising prices. You already see Americans are upset with the Trump administration because prices continue to rise, as they have over the last many years. Donald Trump promised to bring down costs on day one. He said the first day he's elected, he's going to start bringing costs down, but instead, inflation has gone up, grocery prices are up, chicken, pork, steak, all more expensive, eggs are up 15% from last month. All the while, Republicans are focused on things that Americans either don't like or don't care about. Americans don't like, for instance, pardoning violent insurrectionists. It was one of the least popular things that we have seen. A recent poll in the Washington Post is clear. But that was the first major decision Donald Trump made as president, the first major decision. Most Americans don't care whether you call it the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America or something else. Most Americans don't care about building hotels in Gaza or annexing Canada. Yet these are the things that Donald Trump is focused on to distract people from the fact that he doesn't actually have real solutions to the things Americans really worry about. And of course, there are things that Republicans are focused on that make things actively worse. Most Americans don't think it's a great idea to get into a trade war with our closest allies. That's going to make trips to the grocery store even more expensive than they are now. And of course, most Americans do care about making government more efficient. And while everyone certainly supports cutting waste, Americans don't like the harmful chaos that Elon Musk and Doge have unleashed. They don't want to see a rich billionaire treat federal workers with immense disrespect. And make no mistake, Americans did not sign up for Doge to endanger their Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid benefits. That's not government efficiency. That hurts the American people, and what Doge is doing is chaos. And Americans know that the chaos being unleashed by Doge is causing a lot of harm to the country. Americans don't want to see their air traffic safety personnel fired in droves, no questions asked. That's not government efficiency, that's chaos and danger at the airports, in airplanes, at security checkpoints. Our veterans don't want to see the VA starved of resources. Someone came over to me the other day and said, my brother's in a VA hospital. He has a rare disease, and 7 of the people were let go. Who's going to take care of him? They don't want to hear about cuts to the Veterans Crisis Line, where veterans who may have come back from Iraq or Afghanistan with PTSD or other problems have a place to go and a place to call. That's not government efficiency, cutting the Veterans Crisis Line. That's just more chaos, more harm, more hurt. Can you imagine the callousness of firing personnel who operate the Veterans Suicide Crisis Line, as was reported by the staff at the VA? It's a cruel and vindictive way to treat America's heroes. And of course, our 9/11 families did not sign up for Doge trying to cut the 9/11 survivor health program. The people who rushed to the towers, the brave heroes, police, fire, first responders, and others who rushed to the towers the days after that horrible day of 9/11 and got illnesses in their lungs and gastrointestinal tracts, and now we're getting some help. 9/11 families didn't sign up to cut that, but that's precisely what Doge tried to do. We've pushed back, and I'm glad that President Trump and Doge reversed themselves on that issue. They should be reversing themselves on many other issues also that hurt people so badly. But the takeaway is they're very clear. What Doge is doing is not making government more efficient. It's creating more chaos. And if there's one thing Americans don't want in these turbulent times, it's more chaos. Rather than actually cut waste in government in a smart way, a careful way, an efficient way, rather than putting the needs of working people first, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the Republican Party have plunged basic government services into chaos and taken a meat axe at programs that help workers, middle-class families, and low-income Americans, all for the sake of cutting taxes for billionaires and mega corporations. Republicans are focused on the wrong things. They are helping the wrong people, and they are ignoring the vast majority of Americans they promised to serve. Under Donald Trump's Republican Party, billionaires win, American families lose. So let me say it once again. Over the last month, it's become clear how Donald Trump and Republicans govern. Donald Trump and Republicans have focused on things Americans don't care about or don't like, while refusing to focus on things Americans actually do care about.
Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without express written permission from FedNet is prohibited.